All right, so welcome to the show today. Today we have Marc Maret, which is the CEO of Infocentric, and I'm very excited to talk to you about lots of stuff in digital. But first, let's get started with your story. Tell me a bit more about who are you? Who is Marc? And what's the story behind Marc? What's your entrepreneurial story, your personal story that got you to where you are today?
Hi, Daniel. Thank you for having me. Um, it's difficult. I think entrepreneur is for me. It's in the family. It's in the DNA. My father, my grandfather, already were entrepreneurs. Started my career in consulting, as many of um, of my colleagues that also studied in St. Gallen, but then worked for a large organization for 6-7 years, but rapidly also felt that I wanted to do something myself, and this is where I created Infocentric, or co-founded Infocentric, because already at this time, it's about 10 years ago now, we had the belief that digital was going to change everything, and wanted really to be to be a motor in this environment.
I love that. I love that. So 10 years ago, you started a company, worked for a couple of other larger companies before you said, was in the consulting business and things like that. So you mentioned, maybe entrepreneurship is in your DNA. That's okay. I can accept that. On the other side, on the other side, I always believe that there's some sort of a trigger or maybe a bigger purpose, a greater why you become an entrepreneur and decide, it's time to go out there and really make a difference.
Yes.
What do you feel is that for you?
That's true. In fact, I believe that if the large organization I used to work for would have provided me the right environment and the right freedom to innovate and to develop my own ideas, I would probably have stayed there. So you're right. It's a lot about what I just said. It's basically to be able to be free to realize its own ideas, and that was the case for me. I really wanted to be able to grasp the potential that I already saw 10 years ago, linked to digital, and it was not possible to realize this vision and this idea in another corporation. So I found an excellent team, and basically did it ourselves.
So I'm curious about this digital. So you're very, very passionate about digital. I mean, everything, we had another conversation before. I mean, it's just digital is flowing out of you. So I'm curious about this part. I mean, digital in general is a very conceptual thing. It's not very emotional itself, right? Just digital is not very emotional. What is it about digital that makes you so passionate about that thing?
It's not a passion for digital or for technology as such. Is in the development of these new technologies and digital so far, that we are now in a situation where it will impact dramatically the way how humanity works. It impacts a lot healthcare, or the way how robots or how machines are going to heal your body, and how even you can program your body to heal itself. It changed the way how people communicate, behave, work together. It will change the way how society lives, and how revenue, and how we will generate revenue for the whole planet and for all the people. And this is now here. I mean, we have a unique opportunity to make out of it a fantastic chance for humanity, but it is also a place of big dangers, because things will change. And I have two boys, two children. It's also a large impact of what do they have to learn, what is going to be tomorrow. In the generation of our parents, it was much easier. It was industry revolution by past. You had the models, you had classic organization, and for a couple of generations, nothing changed really dramatically. And And yes, it's really to be active and to be able to proactively shape the future, and not only to wait that the future goes wherever it will lead you in the future.
I love that. I mean, some of the things you just mentioned are, I mean, basically it's not about digital itself. It's about the impact that digital has on a hopefully good future. And it's shaping that kind of impact, and it's shaping that kind of future. And that is, that is really big. That's a very, very strong driver. Now, I want to stay a little bit into that story about you and the entrepreneur's story. So you've built a very successful software company in the past 10 years. In Switzerland, you worked with about a third of Switzerland's biggest companies. So you've really established a really, a success story there. And I'd love to dive a little bit more into that journey and understand more about the challenges along the way, because the success on the one side is always nice, but I think what really is inspiring to hear how people overcome some of the biggest challenges along the way to that actual destination. Maybe it is a destination, maybe not, but to that actual success. So tell me a bit more. What do you feel were some of the biggest challenges over the past 10 years in the company that you have faced along the way?
One of them is for sure to have the right people. I mean, we're consulting and delivery management company, so it's a lot about people, and also about not only our own people, but it's also to create the right ecosystem in order to provide large-scale solutions for our clients, which are, as you said, mainly in our specific case, large Swiss-based corporations. That's for sure not easy to find a good one, to nurture them, and to keep the network and the people on a long-term relationship. Then it's also the speed and the evolving things. It's what we do today is far away from what we did 10 years ago. Of course, there are core principles. For example, the fact that we always try to bridge the business and the technology, seeing the technology as a very important enabler, but only the enabler. It's really bridging both parts that bring the value. So these are things that you have some consistent parts of it, but the rest of what kind of technologies, what kind of project, what kind of ROI approaches, what is innovation, it's going very, very fast, and it's impacting Infocentric, but it's impacting any kind of other industries. If you look to banking, for example, which is in Switzerland very heavily in the press, I mean, every industry today, including ours, needs to really rethink about our value proposition, and it's very rapid. So it's the pace and the rapidity which becomes more and more challenging, I think. So you need flexible structures. You need different cultures, so that's for sure a challenge. Yes, I think those two as probably ones, and the other one for any entrepreneur. I mean, yes, you see sometimes, and it was never the case in my naive thinking that you find a company and a couple of months or years ago you're rich and millionaire. It's something, as you said, I think you need passion, you need long-term goals, and you need energy. It's sometimes I say it's a marathon at the speed of a sprint. So you need to be careful of yourself. You need to be careful about the ecosystem and your employee to make sure you hold the distance. And do not burn everything at the same time. It's also about putting the right focus and the right energy in the right directions.
Yeah. So basically,
a couple of ones.
No, that's great. I mean, I think the biggest two ones that I've heard is like finding the right people from a multi-stakeholder perspective. Obviously starting with talent, which is really important, but then also in any other stakeholder relationship, coming from customers to investors to partners to basically any relationship that is there with the stakeholder. The second one is the change in terms of the marketplace, but also like in terms of the models, in terms of innovation itself in in the way we work, in the way we build companies, in revenue models and everything around that.
Yeah.
That has an impact on the company itself, but also has an impact on the work you do with other customers, other companies. So I think these are huge ones. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the present right now. So tell me a bit more about the company, more about like where do you guys are right now, and what sort of the vision 2-3 years into the future. What are some of the big milestones that you're working on?
From the internal perspective, I would say for sure the flexibilization of working with employee and partners, digging into micro working, digging into exploring new ways of working with freelancers or with external partners. Also breaking barriers between the legal construct of a fixed employment contract or a partner or things like this, because at the end, what we do is we do projects to generate value for their clients, and that's what the clients want. So very much working on this one, which has of course a massive impact on the systems, on the collaboration, on the cultures, on the way we approach collaboration internally. So that's one, probably one of the major where we're working internally. Externally, it's a lot about client experience in the general sense, where we will more and more dig into things such as artificial intelligence, bots, or really adding adding not only personal relevant messaging and offering to the client, but also adding intelligence, automatic intelligence through bots or AI, for example. So these are topics for sure that will significantly impact our future offerings.
Yeah, so this is really, really interesting topic, and I kind of want to stay on that. Like last time we talked, we were also talking a lot about this, about sort of like the transformation in employment models, in collaboration models, and that's one of the key things that you are currently pursuing, which I think is amazing, because not so many companies, especially in Switzerland, I know, are really on top of that. It's a lot of that way is very much old school for most companies, and even for startups, even for younger companies. So I'm very, very excited about this. Now let's talk a little bit about that from a perspective of you. I want to explore both you internally, sort of like bring that change on board, and also working with customers in terms of digitalization on their sides when it comes to employment models, when it comes to different ways of working and things like that. Where do you see sort of the biggest gap between where we stand right now and where do you believe we need to be in 5 years or so from today?
I mean, on the internal perspective, for me, ideally, once we have agreed and selected the type of people and expertise we want to work with, it would be really ideally per click, to say what kind of model do you want. I talk now the human resources and staffing perspective. Do you want to be an external? Do you want a lot of holidays, a fixed? Do you believe in pensions funds? Do you not? Do you want part-time? Do you want not part-time? Really, basically, to offer a maximum of freedom of flexibility to the people we work with, no matter in which legal contract and construct they are. Of course, as usual, even for us, legal and compliance and Swiss law is sometimes limiting and will be limiting. but of course within the freedom we have from this perspective, to be as flexible as possible. And this is something you and I know quite well. People good people want freedom. They want flexibility. Salary is important, but much more is the ability to develop itself, to be able to decide when to work, when not to work, to have children, to be able also to combine private and life balance. So this is something we need to support, and this is something that almost every candidate do ask us. Yeah.
No, I love this perspective, and I'm very inspired by how, you know, you're already digging into this, because a lot of people don't even, you know, start to explore these kinds of options. And I'd love to see sort of your perspective, because this is something that you are very, very passionate about, obviously, and it's something that you have gathered a lot of knowledge about, and you have a really interesting perspective on. So I'd like to see your perspective with, now on the one side we have emerging technologies like AI, robotics, and things like that are now growing at an incredible speed. We also have the digital transformation. Well, yes, it's part of the digital transformation, but we have, in terms of digital transformation, we have everything's basically changing. The whole way people work together, companies do things, the whole way productions run, the entire way of how people collaborate in teams working across continents and everywhere virtual and things like that. So everything's changing. Where do you think, if we project 10 years into the future, if that's too difficult, maybe 5 or 10 years into the future, where do you think we're going to be in terms of employment models, in terms of maybe no longer employment models, but collaboration models? Where do you think we're going to be?
I do believe it's going to be much more transparent. So, you know, I don't believe you will have a lot of. I'm sorry and respect very much this industry, but all these headhunters of people matching or searching people, I do believe this will become totally, or more, not totally, but I think if in a 5 years horizon, it's going to be more transparent, and you will have kind of matching support technologies that will say, okay, for this project you need this kind of expertise, and this is where to find it, and you don't need, because it's kind of a blockchain for HC if you want. It's going to be a smart contract, because between an organization, not necessarily an enterprise, but a team, an organization, or really on team level, that will require some specific support, knowing that the team itself will never ever be able to do everything alone. A team will need another team to produce something, or to have a final solution, most probably, and then that it's going to be matched more or less automatically and transparently. And for a corporation, one of the things also on the external world, one of the things we see as a change is, you know, technology are becoming stronger. And today, as a big corporation, such as our clients are, you take the technology, and most of the time you adapt processes and people around the technology. In the past, if we talk about the large ACP projects 10 years ago, you may remember, it was okay. You develop something and make sure that the software does what the people and what the processes are. And this is changing. Today, you take the technology and basically you change the people and the process if it's not working. And the big challenge will be to say, because no one, you know, it's similar when you use Office 365 and the whole Office stack. I mean, Microsoft comes and say, okay, this is our stack, this is our technology, this is the way how you will work with it. This is fine, but if you're a corporation, sometimes you will say, no, for these cases, for these behaviors and things, I don't want to let the technology lead how to work and how my process should look like. And it's about finding the right balance between where do you want to stick to the standard because it's way cheaper and because it's a lot of advantages concerning, maintenance, scalability, and standard best practices. But in some extent, you will want to on purpose change the things, and it's going to be where do you decide not to stick to the standard, and when do you want to stick to the standard. So there is a lot of tensions and discussions ongoing at the moment to know how much will it be industrialized collaboration and how much do you want to customize your collaboration.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting part because there's so many different types of industries. They work, obviously the consulting industry works very different than the production industry and the manufacturing industry. And there needs to be obviously there's going to be a completely different model for how people work together, how they collaborate. And I think it's more external collaboration now that we're talking about. Internal is one asset, is one piece, but external is the other piece. How do you work with exactly like freelancers and partners that may be on a different continent? How do you work with individuals, with teams, with groups that are maybe a bit less structured than traditional outsourcing companies and things like that? And you're sort of like saying there's probably two different approaches, like the more industrialized, standardized way of doing things, and then the more customized way that is not dictated by technology. Basically, here's our software, here's how it works, go make sure your people can actually use it, versus here's who our people are, we want a piece of technology that works with our people. It's sort of like the other way around.
Yes, and also we want our people to have these kind of behaviors. We want to have our people to work in this way, and sometimes the technology give us a predefined ways of using it, and that becomes less and less flexible because you're not going to develop things, but basically you're taking a product in the cloud, so you cannot modify it, and it has of course impact on the way people you work, of how you work, and this is the tension you will have to think about in the future.
So if you look at your own company, I'm curious about this, because it's a very specific example. Let's project 5 years from today. How do you think your company will work with employees and with all different kinds of stakeholders? What will be your ideal vision for that?
I think this is something we're already into today. I mean, it's a buzzword as well, but it's a lot about doing things together. It's about really a lot of co-creation. There is almost no single project we do not develop together with the teams of the client. It is not possible to do something in our industry. Almost not possible to just take a specification and deliver on the specification. I mean, there are so many new things, new methods, new approaches, new technologies, and very often it's also about enabling the client, teaching the client while developing together the solution. So it's a lot about more and more about doing things together, which is, by the way, an interesting challenge for classical procurement organizations, because they used to deal with you fixed prices and to say, okay, I want clear deliverables and a fixed price, and you say fixed price, not possible, because we're working together, and you cannot, and it's also very iterative. Very often with these new agile methodologies, you define the scope and the priorities during the project with the business, with the clients, and this is things you do it on during the project. This is things you do not know at the beginning of the project. So So mastering this and being more performant and efficient in co-creation of solutions is for sure a key challenge, but also a key chance for us.
That's really interesting, because kind of like how it evolved is sort of like there was co-creation internally. One team would work with another team, and they would start doing something together. Like maybe the marketing department would actually talk to the product department, and they would actually do a marketing campaign that would actually understand what the product is. So that's kind of like how it started.
Yes.
And now co-creation is beyond the borders of the organization. Which is now sort of like normal when you work with customers, as a service company working with customers, or a software company working with customers, makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, so now that's, today that's mostly common with smaller and medium-sized companies. When it comes to larger organizations, they have exactly those they have entire procurement departments that deal with supplier vendor management and everything. How do you think it's going to impact larger corporations? Do you think the structure will have to break down more? Do you think there needs to be more flexibility, or do you think it's something completely different?
No, it's the same. It's absolutely the same. I mean, the silos are big challenges for large organizations, and some of them are on the way of breaking them. Others still need probably a generation to break them. But it's very important, and it's a big challenge for all of us. For us, it's easier because we'll always worked like this. And we have an history on only 10 years. It's another challenge if you are 200,000 people and bought X divisions during the time, and it's there. I mean, this is of course very heavy to change and to manipulate, but change must happen there as well. And if I do work with very classical, quality-oriented, large Swiss corporations where they are totally into trying to bring new agile types of organizations, responsibilities, bringing new methods, design thinking, and rapid prototyping into product development. So this is ongoing. Sometimes quicker than in other organizations, but you can feel the change already today.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, exactly with those kinds of companies, I'd be curious to hear your perspective of how you see it, because of your customer companies basically are now starting to do things like that. Because we arrived at a place, especially with large corporations, where we're sort of like systematized everything we can systematize. There's pretty much like there's almost an end to it. And now that we have this perfect structure in place, it's suddenly getting completely destroyed, because now there's this chaotic model of working together suddenly very closely with external stakeholders, with individuals,
with clients,
exactly, with clients, with the marketplace, and everything suddenly is no more. It's really hard now to actually streamline everything and process and put everything into a simple process. I mean, how do companies adapt to something like that, where they finally have the perfect structure in place, and now it's completely getting disrupted because now there's the chaos model sort of like coming, or at least that's how it looks like? How do companies deal with that?
It's different. Well, first of all, I don't think there is a perfect organization. I mean, it's an organization. It's a point in time, and it evolves. Change is the only constant, and that's for sure. And today, speed of the market, today possibilities given by new technologies force any one of us to rethink how we organize the work and organization. And yes, middle management will have some difficulties or reluctance, but we will change. And I think everyone knows it today. This was probably not the case 5-6 years ago, but every organization knows it, and they address it different ways. But what is exactly your question? Can you maybe rephrase?
Yeah, sure. It's more about like large companies right now in terms of working together. So they have a procurement department in place. They have their list of preferred vendors and all of that stuff, and it's all in place right now. And now they're at a point where everything requires a change because that way it doesn't work anymore. And they understand, okay, if we keep working like that, 5 years from today, we'll be completely obsolete. So we need to open up. We need to be more flexible. We need to like a large company thinking about working with one individual. I mean, for purchasing for a procurement department, that's a completely headache, right? So stuff like that. Do you think it's gonna like how do you see big companies deal with that kind of thing? Do you think it's I mean they just adjusted, they need a like different culture when it comes to talking thinking about stuff like that, or what's your perspective there?
I believe they're not starting with procurement, and it depends on the industry, especially on the organization. In some cases, you have a really strong buy-in and support of the CEO to drive the change, and has also the authority and power. I talked just about division heads or middle management that sometimes are reluctant to change, that really have the power to and the willingness to make it, even if it's hard yes. In other cases, which is probably at the moment the more often I find is you're trying to drive change within specific units or places within the organization. So typically you create a first digital business unit that tries to develop new ideas and to change the business. This is something, for example, we did for Sanitas, which is one of the leading Swiss health insurance. I don't know if I allowed to do some publicity, but I tell you, and I think it's well known in the market. It's no secret. But basically, they really basically build up a new digital business in parallel to the ongoing business until a certain point when basically the old business got fully integrated in the new model. So it was a very smart way in, on the one way, letting a new organization develop and evolve without endangering the operational business, which brings revenue, until when you feel comfortable to just integrate the old model, if you want, in the new one. But also it's a small client, so it's probably easier to do so. And another one. Yeah. Another one is, of course, a trial of companies, to do it with knowing that structure is slow and is historically grown. It's probably very slow to motivate and to move forward. That they try with external incubators, or really try to outsource innovation within the incubator, and then ideally, and this is the key challenge, once you have the idea or the product or the proof of concept, to bring it back in the running business. And this is one of the main challenge, I think, with those external innovation labs or incubators, is how once you're satisfied, how do you bring it in the running business and in the DNA of the corporation. So there is no magic formula, but there are different approaches.
Yeah, but yes, and also at the same time, you talked about a really brilliant way of going about it, which is basically, I know this as corporate venturing, so I think it's sort of like going in the same direction, or maybe the exact same thing you are talking about as well. And it's basically this idea of, okay, a large corporation trying something new in a new area without risking their operations, and I think that's a great way of getting. Testing the field and seeing how does it work, how does it feel, is it really complete chaos, maybe it works much better. So that is very, very powerful. Now I'm curious about with your growth of the company. So you are in a change there as well when it comes to adjusting the model, making things more flexible. And you talked about sort of your longer term vision as well. I'm curious to hear, because all of the people who watch this and listen to this, the community is always interested in helping, in sharing and providing inputs and things like that. If you could just point to a few things that, if you had access to them, would make things a lot easier for you to go through that change, what would those be? I mean, it could be anything from connections to insights, best practices, whatever there is. What would be some things that will make it easier?
Easy. Everything what allows me to not reinvent the wheel, and to reuse things. And it's very broad. It can be marketing materials. It can be HC strategy papers, documents. It can be tricks and tips how to retain people, how to incentivize people. It can be just an exchange of things. It's a very broad, basically, almost what I do not. What would support me the best is probably not a book, not an academic study on later things, but as you said, it's really exchanging with peers on the real stuff. And even, where it gets interesting is when you're talking real numbers, when you're talking about real problems, where you're really exchanging on the real stuff, not about what do you think and how and nice models, blah, blah, but how do you organize? How, for example, where we could do best as well, it's an internal topic, but how do you best allocate the right people and talent to the right projects? Very, everyone in my industry is tackling the same thing, and it's multidimensional. It's not easy. It's about career development. It's about culture of the client. It's about skills, of course, affinities. It's about rates and billability and rentability and blah. So many dimensions, and it's not one person. There's so many tensions, and if I take this example, if I can really exchange on this one, would be great. Would be a good support.
So that's perfect. That's absolutely great. So basically, it will be an exchange with a peer who is sort of like, is either going through a similar challenge or has figured out how things work. I think that's brilliant. So if somebody's out there basically dealing with a similar thing and has some insights, or has been able to figure out how to make things like that work, that would be great. A great exchange there. This is great. So in order to make that happen, where can people connect with you? What's the best place online? Where can people find you, connect with you?
For sure, LinkedIn and Xing. It's a very important connecting platform for me. Xing for the German speaking part, LinkedIn for the rest of the world. I'm also on Twitter. Not very active yet, but will be more in the future. That's also part of our external marketing and communication strategy. But for sure, for me, a very good source of inspiration and a place to find interesting things. This is it. And Perfect. The rest, it's a lot of events, the F10 Incubator Accelerator. I'm a member of different associations, so it's my own network, but digital, it's for sure LinkedIn and Xing.
Yeah, excellent. Great. So we're going to link to those sources below. I know you're also a mentor at the F10 Accelerator, so that may be a great place as well. And then, conferences and things you go to, but probably digital is best in terms of LinkedIn and the company website, obviously, as well. So
absolutely.
Great. So thank you so much, Marc. I really appreciate your insights, the story, love the things you have to share. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you very much, Daniel. It was a pleasure as well.